Atheistic Judaism. Atheistic Judaism, or more broadly secular Judaism, refers to individuals who identify culturally, ethnically, or philosophically as Jewish, but don't hold a belief in God or adhere to religious faith in the traditional sense. This form of Judaism focuses more on Jewish identity, heritage, ethics, and cultural practices, rather than on theological belief in a deity or the divine commandments of traditional Judaism. The interesting point here is not that some people of Jewish heritage happen to be atheists. There's no reason to think that the proportion of atheists amongst Jews would be any different from the proportion among any other religious group or from any other religious tradition. Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud, of course, were both of Jewish heritage, and both of them were atheists. But they didn't practice Judaism either. Freud didn't want a traditional Jewish wedding, for instance. What's relatively new, or seems to be new, is the desire to maintain many of the traditional practices and customs of Judaism, to keep the holidays, for instance, but strip them of all their theistic elements. These people consider their Jewishness to be primarily a cultural or ethnic identity rather than a religious one. For them, being Jewish is about belonging to a community with a shared history, with shared traditions and values, rather than subscribing to particular religious doctrines or beliefs about God. Jewish identity can be maintained without belief in God and without participation in religious rituals. Movements like Humanistic Judaism and secular Yiddishism have embraced Jewish culture and ethics without any reliance on God. Founded in the 1960s by Rabbi Sherwin Wine, Humanistic Judaism explicitly embraces a non-theistic approach to Judaism. It celebrates Jewish culture and history, but it doesn't require any belief in a supernatural deity. Instead, it emphasizes human reason, ethical behavior, and the pursuit of a meaningful life. In other words, it's essentially humanist. Congregations in this movement nevertheless observe Jewish holidays and life cycle events like weddings and bar mitzvahs, but they do so with a secular, human-centered focus. I couldn't find out how many people belong to the Society for Humanistic Judaism in the United States. The only figure I found was for 1994, when there were about 10,000 members. I have no idea what that might be now. Atheistic Jews often maintain this strong connection to Jewish ethical values, such as the idea of tikkun olam, repairing the world, which emphasizes social justice, equality, community responsibility. Many secular Jews are active in humanitarian causes, drawing on Jewish ethical principles, even though they don't practice the religious commandments or believe in divine judgment. Some atheistic Jews also engage with the Jewish texts, such as the Torah and the Talmud. They do so from a literary, historical, or cultural perspective, rather than in any kind of devotional way, and they certainly don't regard these texts as divinely inspired. They're studied for their insights into human nature, into ethics, and the Jewish people's experience over the centuries, rather than as a source of Jewish law or divine authority. I guess this is quite similar to the way in which I approach the Bible as a post-Christian. Atheistic Jews may still observe certain Jewish rituals, such as the Passover or lighting candles on the Sabbath, but they do this with an emphasis on tradition, family, community, rather than on any religious meaning. This is not an act of religious devotion. The rituals are seen as cultural markers of Jewish life and continuity with Jewish history and culture, rather than as acts of worship. Recently, some atheists from within the Christian culture, Richard Dawkins prominent among them, have begun to describe themselves as cultural Christians. And I wonder if this is a similar phenomenon to that of atheistic Judaism, or to use the more general term, cultural Judaism. Dawkins has acknowledged that he values the cultural heritage of Christianity, such as its festivals and its traditions, even though he rejects its religious claims. For example, he says that he enjoys attending Christmas carol services. He appreciates the cultural and aesthetic aspects of Christian traditions. Some secular critics have argued that by identifying as a cultural Christian, Dawkins is contributing to, but also benefiting from, the social privilege that Christianity still holds in many Western societies. They feel that cultural engagement with Christianity allows the religion to maintain influence in public life, even in secular contexts, and that atheists should work towards reducing this influence, not reinforcing it. I think this is almost certainly more true in the UK than it is in Australia, where public Christian ceremonies are very rare, although there do remain a few. And symbols of Christianity's glorious past, centuries-old churches and cathedrals, for instance, are few and far between. Christianity has a far less public face here in Australia than it does in the UK. I have some sympathy with these criticisms of Dawkins. There does seem to be an air of social privilege about Dawkins, but maybe that's just my working class roots reacting to Dawkins as one of the landed gentry and as an Oxford-educated man. At the same time, it should be acceptable, surely, to admire church architecture or to enjoy Handel's Messiah or to appreciate art with a Christian subject, while also maintaining a critical stance towards Christianity, even in its cultural expressions. For example, I really like these paintings by Salvador Dali. Does that mean that I am in some way giving support to the Christian church or the Christian tradition? Am I in some way participating in this Christian privilege just because I like these paintings? I think it's possible to have multiple, simultaneous, and even contradictory reactions to works of art like these. We're capable of more nuance in such matters, I think, than some critics might allow. Having said that, I don't regard myself as a cultural Christian. I don't have any particular fondness for the Christmas festivals or for hymns and Christmas carols. If I were the father of a young family today, I wouldn't be getting them baptized or confirmed. I am, of course, an heir to some elements of Christian history and culture, because I'm part of this Western society. But I see myself more as a son of Greek philosophy and the Enlightenment, for exactly the same reason that I'm part of this Western society. I don't think cultural Christianity has the same depth, or perhaps the same hold on people, as what we might call cultural Judaism. I think cultural Christianity is based on a long history of privilege, conquest, and dominance, whereas cultural Judaism is based on a long history of persecution and suffering. I think perhaps these forge stronger bonds with the past.